right at the end of the cycle of the water going back to the pool, draining back to the pool. Then they saw the pump was off, turned it on. That was another 5 kids to the pool. Then you have the one, and I know some of you have had some chemical accidents down here, right? Okay. You all heard about, I'm sure you all heard about the one in Antioch, city of Antioch, the water park. That was a mechanical failure, not an operator failure. And once again, that was pump turned off because the VFD, it was a separate, these are large pumps. VFD on the wall, pump down in the pump pit. VFDs can detect numerous number of things that can be going wrong. Okay, high torque, low torque. I mean, there's just so many things. It turned off the pump, but there was a problem with a flow switch on the chemical controller. And it is a rotary, so it could have been going backwards, but there was no air leak. But for whatever reason,
Maybe
it fed.
wasn't electrically interconnected, right? Probably. Between the
Was not
VFD
electrically connected.
Between the VFD and the chemical.
Was not electrically integrated.
That's right.
No.
Right.
Okay, but this is also one that communicates.
Right.
Okay, so it fed, and that was 17 kids went to the hospital. Only one stayed overnight. Most of them went because they were unaccompanied minors. So they had to go. Okay? Question. So I finished out about, we're going to talk a little bit more about interlock. Okay? Go ahead.
So my question has to go with the bleached hair guy.
Yeah.
You were mentioning that the office,
We're always going back to the bleach
I
hair
know.
guy.
the office was closed.
No, I don't have his number for you.
Never mind. No, yeah. But only from here down.
That's right.
That's a weird requirement.
Yeah.
So
Kinky.
No,
Go ahead.
Kiki.
Yeah, Kinky. Kinky is kinky. There we go.
Trust me, I've heard
Oh,
that.
I'm sure.
Anyways,
Go ahead.
but you mentioned that it happened only on the weekends those weekends when they weren't there. So during the week when they were there monitoring, weren't they noticing?
It was, so during a week leading up to that Friday, first of all, this was in the winter.
Okay.
So it's not being used very much at all, okay? And it was kind of colder, okay? So the parts per million level is going up constantly. It's probably been going up for the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months, whatever. I don't know how long, okay? It's constantly going up. They reached that point of no return in which somebody used it and we got bleaching.
Okay. So those reagents that you're talking about, because we all have them in our test kits for our pools, like we're told not to keep them in the trunk of our cars, but I mean, reality is
You gotta keep it somewhere when you're going out.
So like, how sensitive are they? I mean, should we just be replacing them as a caution every, I don't know, a couple months or?
Well, I carry my test kit in my van, usually. I've gotten a whole lot better in the last year of taking it out of the van. But normally I've been always keep it in the van. When we get to 100 and, 95, 100, 105, 110, we got up to 116 this last year. I'm in Martinez, if anybody know where that at, Concord, Walnut Creek, okay? We hit 116. At 116, what is it inside the van? It's an easy 140, if not more at that point, okay? I'm going out, and if I'm going to use the test kit, it's like, just literally take the test kit, dump it, and restock with fresh reagents, okay? You can look for 2 things. 3 things, okay? If you are in an area where the weather gets cold, I mean very cold in the winter, okay? If you get where the bottles freeze, number 2, you can shake it and you hear little rocks in there, okay? But when they warm up, the little rocks don't dissolve back into solution. If number 2's gone, number 1's gone, probably number 3 is also bad, okay? Now here's another tip for you. You must use white paper Can't be a white paper towel, because that's meant to absorb. It's got to be something where if you put a drop on the paper, the drop's going to sit there. When you use number one, this would be from a Taylor test kit, okay? I'm assuming a majority of you probably use Taylor test kits.
We have Lamont.
You've got the Lamont. So on the Taylors, for those that are Taylor, number one, when you're squeezing that bottle and you see that drop come out, it's got to come out clear. If there's any pink to it at all, it needs to be replaced. Okay? That's number one. So you put that drop right on there. If there's any pink to it, and if you're replacing one, then you're replacing two, you're replacing three. Okay? Number two, reagent has to be blood red. You put that drop on that piece of paper, it's got to be blood red. If it's got any orange tint to it at all, it needs to be replaced. And rocks, number one, number two. And I did pH, right? No, okay.
Yeah, the red.
That's true.
The red was,
Red.
huh?
Yeah, that's pH.
No, that was number two, I think I said. Number two has to be blood red.
Right, that's pH.
Number two would be part of the chlorine.
And the Lamont is.
1, 2, and 3.
But I don't know.
1, 2, and 3 are, 1 and 2 is free chlorine, 3 is total chlorine. So it's part of the chlorine.
So would that be true for the Lamont kits too, more or less? I mean, it sounds to me like as a.
I can't answer that 100%, so I'm not gonna answer it at all. I would have to get you that answer.
Like maybe every fall, just replace all chemicals, because through the summer, everybody's had it in their car.
I would actually wait till going into the spring.
Yeah.
That's when you replace them.
We had
I
a
mean-
break point.
Tell you, let me flip this thing here.
You know, because then everybody's
All right.
fresh on it. And that's the funny.
You wanna take a break? We only got like
I was just going-
2 or 3 slides left.
I was just like, oh, my legs are-
Break now or finish the slides?
I'm sorry, what?
You got 2 or 3, let me see what's
Do
next.
the slides, go ahead.
There's one slide.
My bladder can
2
wait.
slides. I understand. I'll follow you. Okay. So we're talking about that interlock. So if anybody proposes a chemical controller, this is going to go back to plan check, okay? But if you got people out there in the field, you've got any of the chemical controllers with the rotary flow switch, have them put in the inline check valve in. $28, $30. One of the problems is solved. Because the flow switch can now no longer flow backwards and tell the controller that there is still flow. Simple little inline check valve. Okay? Problem with electrically interlocking. Okay? Chemical feeders or chemical controller. Okay? Sometimes when a motor fails, it will do so and it will trip the circuit breaker. There are times when the motor fails and the circuit breaker doesn't trip. So you still have power coming down to the motor, but it isn't working.
Right.
Which means you've got a branch line here now going to the chemical controller or the feeders. It means it still has power.
So it thinks.
Because the circuit breaker didn't trip. So it has power and they can feed. So this is particularly a problem when you have feeders electrically interlocked, no chemical controller because there's no flow switch to control them. Okay? So that's a big problem. Now in the last how many years, we've got the pumps with the VFDs right on them. Pentair, Hayward, Jandy / Zodiac / Fluidra. I don't know if you know, but Zodiac was just recently bought by a company called Fluidra. So those pumps, they all have VFDs, smaller pumps with VFDs right on them. Programming takes place in those VFD, which means they come off of the time clocks. Okay?
Come in.
So they come off of the time clocks and you do the programming right there on the VFD. Better go that way.
What is VFD?
Variable frequency drive. So that way you can change the speed. Okay? So they always have power now, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365. Which means if it's electrically interlocked to the feeders, or the chemical controller to the feeders, you always have power. They're no longer electrically interlocked. So how do you take care of that problem? Hopefully you'll be able to see this up here. Okay. This is a chemical interlock system. Hold it. Yeah, that would be great. Vanna, will you please hold this?
Vanna.
You can't move too far.
You can't carry that, Jim.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what's happening here is you've got your power source coming in, as you can see. Okay. And then you've got two relays inside here. One would be for chlorine and one for ORP. I mean, one for pH and one for ORP. Okay? So if, as opposed to interlocking electrically with the motor, with the pump, you use a flow switch. So if there's no flow, your chemical feed's not on. But when there is flow, you've got chemical feed. The flow stops, it's off. So if I were to do this, and power terminates, it goes off. Circuit breaker went off, power, somebody flipped the switch, nothing can work. Okay? And that's all based on a flow switch. Your flow switch would go in line in your main line. In your main recirculation. No side stream. Okay? No flow, no feed.
So with the feeder, you can the flow control.
So this is the best method of interlocking chemical feeders and chemical controllers. Okay? I've thought them all out. I've looked at them. I've talked to electricians. I've talked to some electrical engineers. You know, there are different things that can be used to electrically interlock, like the pressure switches and this, that, and the other thing. When it comes down to it, a simple little flow switch is the easiest and best method of interlocking feeders. Okay? So, questions, and we take a pee break, or a break.
So when you were talking about the electrical interconnection, the problems with that is overcome, you're saying, by adding the flow switch so that it detects not only the flow, but also the electrical. So either or is turned off, then the
Right.
flow stops.
So this is a secondary. I didn't say that.
Okay.
This would be installed as a secondary flow switch or control. Okay? A chemical controller would have its own flow switch,
Okay.
and now you have a secondary one. So if you've got a chemical controller and it communicates out, okay, then you want something like this between the chemical controller and the feeders. This goes in between. So the controller might say, hey, feed chemicals. And this one over here says, whoa, wait a minute now. There's no flow in the main line. Don't allow it to feed. Okay? That would take care of a situation like an air leak in the system and the water's flowing backwards. There is flow. This flow switch only goes in one direction. It can't go backwards. So that's the nice thing about that. So I tried to explain all this on paper up there in Northern California. And a number of them got it, and they're all sitting there shaking their heads. Okay? Okay. At the next meeting, I brought in a box. There was a couple of stairs, okay? I brought in this box, and it's particularly one young guy. He says, now I learned something. He says, because I'm visual, I'm not auditory. He said, I needed to see it. I kind of understood what you said, but not completely. He says, now I understand it. Now, we're putting this box together ourselves, okay? We could do that as a pool. I mean, this is nothing nothing new. We're just doing it in a box out in the office, you know, in our shop, as opposed to doing it out in the field, which a pool guy can do. Difference might be is there was a third item in there. It's a transformer. We're taking the voltage going out to the flow switch and we're dropping it down from 115 volts down to low voltage. We're in the 12 to 24 volt range. I do see sometime down the road, I don't know how many years, we will probably be moving to low voltage lights, period, bar none. Get rid of the 120 volts, residential and commercial. They'll have to come down to low voltage. And low voltage by NEC code is below 15 volts. Okay? Just because of the number of electrocutions that there have been throughout the country. Okay? So that's why we're doing it right now. If I can keep 115 volts out of the water, then I'm going to do it. So, Ray, any other questions?
Yeah, who manufactures those flow? That's what they're called, flow switches.
Well, this is the flow switch.
Okay.
This is just a feeder. This happened to be blue-white feeder.
Okay.
Okay? And this box here, we're actually putting the components together in a box.
Okay.
Okay? Our company ourselves. Makes it a whole lot easier.
Right.
This is literally plug and play.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've got one plugged in over here. That provides the power through to the relays. And I've got the other one plugged in to provide the power to the transformer. They could be on the same power source. They could be different power source. But the reality is there's no electricity going out to those feeders if there is no flow.
I have a question. I've been plan checking a large pool with a surge chamber, and there was a pipe on the plan connected to surge tank, extra pipe. And then I asked the architect, what is this? He said, it's an 8-inch pipe, and they're gonna feed manually calcium bicarbonate to the surge chamber, small surge chamber. I said, we're not gonna allow it for two reasons. One, in the code, you must be automated. Any auxiliary chemical feed that's in the code, that must be automatic. Second thing, it will screw up the controller because it's a small surge chamber. They're adding a lot of calcium bicarbonate or sodium or whatever chemical is. It's going to screw up the chemical controller. I said, this is not.
And they're adding bicarb or calcium?
He was saying
Or both.
He was saying calcium bicarb. I said, is it sodium? I said, no, calcium bicarb.
Okay, so the guy doesn't know.
Architect.
So the guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing.
Right.
Okay,
No,
that's number one because you don't have calcium bicarbonate.
Right, so on the
It's either
plan
calcium
stage.
chloride or sodium
Well, they
bicarbonate.
can add anything.
Or
It's a
carbonate.
pipe. It's a pipe. They can add anything manually.
Okay. So, agree with you. A, chemicals are never supposed to be added before the pump. They're always supposed to be the last thing
Yeah.
added going out of the room. Okay. Number two, if they add high rate sand filters, high rate sand filters or cartridge.
I think it's highly centric. It's a big pool.
Okay.
It's highly centric.
High rate sand filters or cartridge filters. If they take that calcium and they pour it in front, it is going to help coat the sand. The sand and calcium is cement. Okay, I have seen filters,
Yeah.
the large filters. You know, you got 16-inch manhole to get in them. I have seen sand in boulders so large it can't come out of that 16-inch or 18-inch manhole. And they got a wrecking bar that's probably center of the table to here, trying to break these things up just to get them out of the filter so they can repair the filters. That's adding calcium in front of your system. Okay, that happened to be the calcium hypochlorite system that used to feed on the suction side of the pump. Okay, and by the way, they had majority of all laterals were broken. Okay, so they're going to screw up that sand, or they're going to screw up the cartridge filters, or even DE filters. They'll screw them up by adding the calcium up front. So they should all be added in back. So I fully agree with you not to add them in the surge tank. Okay? I'm not 100% sure. I'll be honest. I'm damn good with the code.
Okay.
I'm not as good as environmental health with the code.
I will show
So,
it to you.
I
It says
am-
auxiliary, including auxiliary. It says chemical feeder.
It says including auxiliary.
The word auxiliary.
Auxiliary feed.
Correct.
Well, then you're
That's an
right.
auxiliary.
Then you're right that it can't
Everybody
be.
missed it, but this is what it is.
Well, you got one up on me, and I just learned something new then because on the auxiliary,
Yes.
you said it has to be automated.
But there is no.
Like a chemical feeder.
Okay, but there is no sensors
Right.
to test for alkalinity or calcium or cyanuric acid and several other things. There are no sensors that can sense for those.
That's why it shouldn't be there, that pipe.
Well, but there's no sensors to test for those, so you can't automate that per
Right.
se.
It should be to the
You
water,
can
probably.
semi-automate it by putting them on feeders like USF. They got a vat here, water goes in, calcium goes in. Another vat, water goes in, bicarb goes in. Little mixer on it, keep it in solution,
Where you
and
at?
they just automatically
To the pool?
to feed it into
the
the
floor.
line to maintain their alkalinity and their calcium hardness. So it's
To add it to the pool water?
sort of
or-
automated because you've got a feeder
Right.
on them, but they are interlocked. They are interlocked to the chemical controller, and now they're interlocked with a system like this. So they got a backup. So it does say auxiliary, huh?
Yeah.
All chemical feeders, including disinfectant feeders and the auxiliary feeders used for solutions, slurries, or solids, along with the components such
Good.
as pumps, strainers,
Isn't that if it
He's
is a
good.
feeder?
huh?
Isn't that if it is a feeder? This one's not a feeder. This is just the guy dumping it in, right?
Well, that's true. So
And
it says
auxiliary
if.
feeders. Yeah.
Does
guess
it
you
say
could call
if,
the
or
guy a
does it
feeder.
say that
Goes
they
on,
have to be
But
automated?
then it says, the chemical feeder equipment shall, and you go to
Wait.
number 2, be constructed with an adjustable output rate device, and adjusted by an automatic chemical monitoring control system.
Okay. So that's, go back to number 1. Read that one again.
What, the first part?
The first part.
Yeah, all chemical feeders, including disinfectant feeders,
Okay.
and the auxiliary feeders.
Okay. All chemical feeders. But what you explained was it's an 8-inch pipe for the guy to manually walk over with a bag and dump it
It's
in.
gonna mix it and dump
So
it.
therefore, that is allowed. It doesn't,
It's
this
not a
doesn't
chemical
say,
feeder.
doesn't say it has to be
A chemical feeder.
Automated.
automated.
Right.
But if it is, it must meet this. So if you made a solution and it was pumping it in, okay, then it has to be automated. Next word, lock the door, okay? But it doesn't say they have to automate that.
No, we're not saying that they have to automate.
Right.
We are saying if you're gonna use it, it has to be automated, or do not use the pipe to manually add to the search chamber.
I'm fully in agreement with you, but by code, I think they're allowed to put the pipe there.
Because they're allowed to manually add chemicals, right? In general.
Right.
Well, but it's I haven't seen all these years. I've done many large pools. I haven't seen any extra pipe with manually adding to the search chambers. That's why
So
this is the
is it-
reason.
It's an
I
8-inch.
was
8 inch is
scrutinizing,
huge.
Yeah, it's
and I
basically
talked to
So
people.
for
They
chemicals.
said
So it
not-
goes up to the
not-
ground,
not
Yes.
ground
supposed
level,
to
and
be
they can just.
I agree with you that
Not
the chemicals
supposed to
should
be
not be
to
added
the search
before the
chamber the way
system.
that it is also.
I agree with you, the
Yeah.
chemicals should not be added before the system. But code does not prevent them from doing it.
It would be the same thing as if they open the hatch and dump stuff in there,
Right.
wouldn't it?
It's the same damn thing.
Yeah.
You got a pipe, you just made it easier because they don't have to open a hatch now.
Right.
Yeah.
So they can do it by code, not advisable because they will screw up their filters
The filter,
and their chemical, and the big thing
control
is,
too.
it,
Yeah.
I was just gonna say, the chemical controller will
If
be
you dump
screwed
all
up.
that thing to that, it's gonna screw the.
It will be screwed up. If they forget to close the valves on in and out of the flow cell, the chemical controller is gonna start reacting and feeding based upon that. particularly the sodium bicarb,
Right,
because that's gonna make the pH go up,
right.
which makes the ORP go down. It's gonna start feeding both based upon false information.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I fully agree with you, it shouldn't be done, but there's nothing in code that says they can't do it.
Okay, so then that word auxiliary, for how, in what condition you can say, that, giving me an example
Right.
of the auxiliary.
So a good example would be
Right.
USF, University of San Francisco, where they actually have a tank and they're adding the calcium to the tank and water,
Uh-huh.
but then they have a feed pump feeding it in constantly. Now there's a feeder. It's auxiliary chemical, it's not pH, it's not chlorine, but there is a feeder involved. Now that must comply with this.
Once it's feeder involved.
Once there is a feeder involved,
Involved.
the manual feed doesn't come under that, but
So-
once they put a feeder on it,
So feeder, you are saying, but the feeder can be manual or can be automatic.
No, it's saying it has to be automatic.
it says,
If
if you put a feeder
feeder-
on there, it must be
Yes,
automated, it says.
yes, that's what it's.
It doesn't say must, it says shall.
Okay.
That legally, that is a difference.
Right.
Where should the injection point be with something like that?
Chemicals are always added as the last thing leaving the room.
Into the pool?
Right before.
Going to boot before the pool and the spa. So you can't put a 8-inch pipe
Before the pump.
on the plumbing
Before the pump.
before it leaves the room because you'd have water coming out and be under pressure. So the only other way to add those chemicals is to physically walk out to the pool or the spa
Right.
and physically add it as we've always done.
Yeah.
Or they have to put some tanks in that they are physically mixing the chemical with water, and then they're gonna put a feeder on, and now it must be automated. Yeah,
So even though there's mixing in the surge tank, because you know you have like a water slide, for example,
Mhm.
all the water comes into the surge tank, and there's the filtration is drawn and returned to that same surge tank. So you're getting chlorine pushed right in, and then theoretically it could be pulled right back out to the filter if it's, you know, you're supposed to put them on opposite sides, but you know what I'm saying?
like a splash pad,
Right,
it'd have to be on the opposite
Right,
sides.
so.
Features
in your
versus-
case, wouldn't there be some mixing in that surge tank before they drew? But there's no suction from that surge tank straight to
Well,
the
from
pool,
surge
it
tank,
all
it-
goes straight
Well,
to the
there is a
filtration.
surge suction going to the pump.
Mhm. And that's
There
the
is.
only, and then the
Well,
returns
there's a
are all
main
in the
drain
pool.
line, and
Okay,
then the surge suction line
Mhm.
going to the pump. So
Chemicals are-
pulling-
If you go to
Yeah, that's
CPO, and I'm sure the MAC will say it too,
Mhm.
if you go to the CPO, it says chemicals are not supposed to be added to a surge balance collection tank.
Mhm.
3 different names basically meaning the same.
Small
Chemicals are not supposed to be added
volume
there.
of water, we are adding all this chemical.
That's true for that
I
huge
cut-
Yeah,
100,000,
huge, yeah.
900,000 gallon
Yeah.
pool, that makes sense.
And then going through
You
the
should be
controller,
thinking-
and it's gonna.
Yeah,
Chemical controllers gonna be screwed up, and that's why I would deny
That
them
was
the.
unusual when I said I've never seen this before. I told the architect, never seen it.
It's not in code,
I know,
okay?
understand that.
But I would deny it
Yeah.
for screwing up the filters,
Right, it's a
screwing
huge
up chemical
pool.
controller. The
Yes.
chemical controller will
Yeah.
not function properly,
Right.
and based on that alone,
Mhm.
they will have problems with both pH and sanitizer,
And the filter.
and therefore I would not allow it.
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah,
Break and then more questions?
okay?
Okay.